Jim Hansen had. Good morning, early bird. No, we're not here. What? Ugh. I've been sitting here waiting to get started. Apparently, then my brain just goes. This is the Bookless Classroom is where we're at. And we're going to go ahead and get started. We're reading our book on day, who's we? I know, me. On day 176 of the classroom. Thanks for joining me here in the Bookless Classroom, where we are figuring out mostly history topics is what we're doing. And I'm trying to figure out where all my president's books went. Yeah, somebody stole those too. Why they want to just make my whole podcast take a nosedive, I don't know. Sounds like what's his name in his goose flight. Wah, wah. Okay, so day 176 of the classroom. Thanks for joining me. I am Dr. That is Dr. Annette Feravich. I worked hard. Don't you forget it. Don't you forget it, because you don't want to forget it. Let's go ahead and get to our book, The War to End All Wars. Why was it called The War to End All Wars? Who remembers? Who remembers out there? Why was World War I called the War to End All Wars? Who remembers? That's right. I heard you. It is because it was supposed to end all wars. Taking up a superpower status, making superpower alliances, superpower military, superpower imperialism, where we had all those empires, and a very nationalistic kind of perception out there, right? Okay, so we know why it was called the War to End All Wars. And we just went through the four causes: alliances, imperialism. These are the things we're supposed to be looking for as I'm reading. Militarism and nationalism, which they just all go hand in hand, don't they? They do, Dr. Feravich. They do. I see exactly what you mean. Do you? Oh, I wanted to show you that I actually do have which I said I was going to refer to time and time again, every once in a while, the kinds of government. Let me see if there's anything else. That's what else I wanted right there. There we go. Let's take a look at those kinds of government. Just really quickly. Nope. Yep. Right? So here are our kinds of government that we talked about. And we can kind of see then how we get people interested more and more in things like oligarchies and dictatorship. Why? Because we give people a voice and you're like, hey, dummy, I don't want you having that kind of voice. I want you having my voice. And the other person's like, hey, dummy, what you're saying doesn't make any sense to me. And then the other one's like, hey, shut up. And they're like, no, you shut up. And this is how it all begins, right? So they're like, yeah, guess what? You with the big mouth, you get no vote. That's what happens to people with big mouths. What? This is a democracy. No, it's not a democracy. It's a republic. So get with the program. There's our kinds of government. And we think about it as, how many votes do they give everybody a vote? Does it really matter? Only in presidency? And that thing happens all within what? A circus? I don't even know. I don't know. Let's not forget about our 4 reasons that are listed. And this actually, I did not put this in yet. I will make sure I put it in the references. I only put the 2 references there, which I'm trying to get better at. There's our imperialism. And there we are looking at the domination of an African nation in much the same way that we dominated Native America, right? And got rid of their customs and got rid of their religion and their spirituality and their customs. Did I already say that? I'm not sure. Their culture, if I said customs already, we got rid of it all. And that is just a mark on their souls. So there we have it, what it used to look like, and then we get the idea of empires. And this is how we then fall into the trap of superiority and concepts of imperialism. We are starting chapter number 3 in our book, The War to End All Wars, World War I, by Russell Freedman. He was born to write this book. That's all I'm saying. With a name like Freedman, what else would you do? Is that a pseudonym? 6 million soldiers were on the march across Europe during the first weeks of August 1914. German cavalry troops advancing at a steady trot had crossed the border into neutral Belgium. Now, this is a really big deal, isn't it? Because Belgium is neutral. They are saying, I'm not going to make alliances. I don't have your back. Just let me mind my own business. Let me be little Belgium. You can go about your business. And they're like, yeah, screw you. You're in the war. French troops had attacked German Alsace-Lorraine, confident that they could recover those 2 lost provinces. A British expeditionary force was about to sail across the English Channel and link up with French forces fighting in Belgium. In the east, Russian troops poised on the border of East Prussia were about to invade Germany and advance toward Berlin. Okay, so we saw the old map. Let's take a quick peek at the new map. Oh, yeah, here it is. This is it. Hold on. Just getting this where it belongs so I can maneuver all of this, which I should have had maneuvered. There we go. Okay, so there is the new map. And so what they're talking about is moving into, let's talk about this English Channel here. So here's England, right? There's England. Here's France. Here's Spain. So they're talking about crossing. You could see why England would have a strategic position if what they did was build up their battleships, which is what they did, right? But now they have to come in here in order to protect Belgium. So you see where here's the United Kingdom crossing the English Channel, and France is right by Belgium, and there's Germany and the German Empire right there. There's Austria-Hungary. This is all today, but it's very closely matched, isn't it? And I'm able to use this wonderful map to show us here is Belgium. This is Belgium here. Am I right? I better turn that back on again. Those back on again. As I'm talking, I want to make sure that I'm correct about these things. No, those are the Netherlands. There's Belgium right on the border of France and Germany. And the Netherlands and Belgium have typically been neutral places, right? Non-war peacemongers, tree huggers, right? Where they call them socialists, but not socialists, but Marxists, right? Marxist socialism, not the National Socialist Party, Nazi Party, right? Okay, so we're talking about the United Kingdom having a strategic advantage, especially with their ships that they have, right? So there's the United Kingdom, there's Belgium, there's France. And Germany came into Belgium, and France is easily going to topple. So this is all also talking about basically the domino effect, which you hear a lot about with World War I. Let's see here. This says German infantry troops advance across Belgium, August 1914. Remember that June 28th was when Frank Ferdinand was assassinated and his wife Sophie, right? Okay, so there we are. There's German troops trotting across Belgium. As the war began, France, Britain, Belgium, and Russia became known as the Allies. Germany and Austria-Hungary were called the Central Powers. Several European countries watching and waiting on the sidelines would soon choose sides, but others, including Switzerland, Holland, and Sweden, would remain neutral and play no part in the fighting. Okay, so we already talked about some of those neutral states over there, right? So there's Russia here. You can see where Russia is coming in, but Russia really is east and to the north. I wanted to show you where Switzerland is. So here is another neutral country that is on the border of all of this. There is Switzerland. See right there. France, Belgium, England, Switzerland. And we know that Italy comes into play as well to be part of the Allies, right? Let me make sure that I said that right. Yes. Germany, no. Yeah. Germany, Italy, and Austria-Hungary. So Italy does not come in defense of France and Britain, right? It comes in on Germany's side. So Italy here comes in on the side of Germany, despite Belgium being invaded and Switzerland being neutral in the play, right? But that has to do with alliances and as we learned yesterday, family. They're all family. Cousins marrying cousins, who even knows? But they're all related. We don't have a Holland, right? We don't have a Holland any longer, so I don't know exactly where. Oh, Holland is where the Netherlands. That's where Holland is. What is she looking at? Right here. I'm looking at our old map. It's by Belgium, the Netherlands. It used to be Holland. So if we look at our map, this used to be Holland. It is now the Netherlands. All right. So that's neutral. Holland, Belgium, Switzerland are all neutral there. But look at those teeny tiny countries. They're like, yeah, you know why you're neutral? Because you don't have enough money for an army or enough people. So ha ha hee hee. Uh-oh. I literally lost my spot. Okay. Moving these pillows, I'm going to end up putting my nails in every part of this couch, which is just frustrating me. I need to find a pillow with some suction cups. Or a non-slip backing, right? Kaiser Wilhelm. Here we are with this Kaiser Wilhelm dude. I don't trust him, do you? Kaiser Wilhelm, confident of a German victory, assured his departing troops that they would be home before the leaves have fallen from the trees. Remember, they said everyone was expecting that this was going to be a short war. The war to end all wars. It's going to be short. We're going to be the leaders. Just letting you know. His soldiers looked forward to occupying Paris. Of course they did. Bunch of Parisian hoes. Those Germans. That's what I'm saying. Not Parisians. And marching in triumph down Champs-Élysées, French troops were just as certain that they would march victoriously into Berlin and parade along that city's famous boulevard, Unter den Linden. Unter, not Unter, Unter. In the capital cities of all the combatant nations, the outbreak of war was greeted with emotional displays of patriotism. Crowds thronged the streets, singing their nation's song and cheering every military unit that passed. That is nationalism. Nationalism based on military power, by the way. In Paris, people were shouting, "To Berlin," while the German capital crowds urged their army on to Paris. In the first days of mobilization, there was, of course, a lot of enthusiasm, recalled Robert Pustis, who was a French student at the time. Everybody was shouting and wanted to go to the front. The cars, the railway wagons loaded with soldiers were full of tricolor French flags and inscriptions, "A Berlin, A Berlin." We wanted to go to Berlin immediately with bayonets, swords, and lances, running after the Germans. The war, we thought, was to last 2 months, maybe 3. Here we've got a picture of British recruits at rifle drill during basic training, September 1914. You know, one of the things that Americans learned throughout was really the importance of a disciplined military, right? A trained military, not people running roughshod, through countryside with a pistol or rifle, right? In this picture, it says crowds outside Buckingham Palace cheer King George, Queen Mary, and the Prince of Wales following the declaration of war. And then you can see what this national pride, which is nationalism, right? That's nationalism is national pride. How they can get their soldiers, regular people like me and you, inspired to risk our lives and actually cheering to go to the front lines. How do you get a peasant people to do that? Through nationalism. They don't have a piece of imperialism, right? They don't have a piece of the empire. So how do you get them to go to battle for the empire? Nationalism. That's exactly what's happening here in the United States. So pictures of British troops getting ready in their drills and pictures of the crowd cheering on, "Ah, Berlin, ah, Berlin." I'm not sure if that's French accent or not. It likely sounds like German. Swept up in an overpouring of patriotic fervor, young men flocked to recruiting stations all over Europe. In Britain alone, nearly 1 million volunteers had enlisted by the end of 1914. Fired up with the conviction that their cause was a noble one and the enemy an aggressor, they joined the colors and went to war. As men left for the front, women took their places in the workforce. Women had traditionally worked in fields such as teaching and nursing. Now, in every warring nation, women took over jobs previously filled by men in munition factories, offices, and agriculture. And as the war continued, in almost any sort of job that could free a man for combat. I'd never been in a factory before, but the crisis made you think, a British housewife, Mrs. M. Hall, remembered. I thought, well, my brothers and my friends are in France, so a friend and I thought to ourselves, well, let's do something. So we wrote to London and asked for war work, and we were directed to a munitions factory. Good grief, look at them, totally like horses. Men went to war, not the horses. Why are these women pulling wagons like they're mules? Hitched to the plow, French farm women at planting time. With men away at war, women across Europe took the men's places on the farms and in the factories and offices. All right, again, men had horses doing that. Why are women attached to a plow? I swear to God sometimes. I do. Not to him. About this tragedy that's unfolding. We worked 10 hours a day. That's from 8 in the morning until 6:30. It was a perfect factory to work in. Everybody seemed unaware of the explosive powder around them, unaware of any danger. Once or twice we heard, oh, so-and-so's gone. Perhaps she'd made a mistake and her eye was out, but there wasn't any big explosion during the 3 years I was there. Most people supported their government. To many Frenchmen, the war was a crusade to save justice and liberty. To many Germans, it was a struggle to save civilization. That's a superiority complex, isn't it? I know better. I know better for you. I am a patriot. No, you're just being patronizing. There's a difference, Germans. But that is interesting, isn't it? Their fervor can be no less if they're trying to save civilization. Their fervor can be no less, right? Germany had a deeply rooted military tradition in which the army enjoyed great prestige and played a dominant role in government. Kaiser Wilhelm, surrounded by his military entourage, always appeared in the metal bedecked uniform of the all-highest warlord at the constant parades and celebrations of past military victories. When war was declared, the Kaiser addressed the enormous crowd that had gathered beneath his palace balcony. A fateful hour has fallen upon Germany, he announced. Envious people on all sides are compelling us to resort to a just defense. The sword is being forced into our hands. I command you all to go to church, kneel before God, and pray to him to help our gallant army. To help us fight a war. Pray to your God to help us fight war. A young German soldier, Walter Lemire, joined the army with his brothers because as he told his parents in a letter home, that is the simple duty of every one of us. And this feeling is universal among the soldiers, especially since the night when England's declaration of war was announced in the barracks. None of us got to sleep until 3 o'clock in the morning. We were so full of excitement, fury, and enthusiasm. It is a joy to go to the front with such comrades. We are bound to be victorious. Nothing else is possible in the face of such determination to win. My dear ones, be proud that you live in such times and in such a nation, and that you too have the privilege of sending several of those you love into this glorious struggle. Here we have Red Cross or Iron Cross. Wounded and a prisoner, our soldier cries for water. The German sister pours it on the ground before his eyes. There is no woman in Britain who would do it. There is no woman in Britain who will forget it. A British propaganda poster depicts a German nurse pouring a glass of water on the ground in front of a wounded British soldier pleading for a drink. Both governments issued propaganda accusing the enemy of horrific and unusually imaginary atrocities. Well, you know, that's not right, is it? I feel like there's a lot of atrocities going on right now. However, maybe they're just feeding me a bunch of bunk. Although I don't know why they would do that and have what? Peace, love, and harmony out there? I doubt it. On both sides, government propaganda painted the enemy in the darkest terms. Emotions ran high when Britain this scene was in Gunsmoke, by the way, too. So they did the scenes in the movies a lot where the enemy would just take the water and they're like, I'm pretty sure I might have seen it in Little House on the Prairie, too. So it's a common theme there. Yeah, don't clip that either, you evil people doing my evil laugh. That's about the evil warmongers, for Pete's sake. Vengeance. When Britain declared war on Germany, an angry crowd gathered outside the British embassy in Berlin, shouting insults, hurling stones, and smashing windows. The next day, as British ambassador and his staff prepared to leave the embassy's 3 German employees, having been paid a month's salary in advance, stripped off their embassy uniforms, spit and trampled on them, and refused to help carry the ambassador's trunks down to the waiting taxis. In the Russian capital, St. Petersburg, soon to be renamed Petrograd, an angry mob broke out into the German embassy, smashing in a side door. I could see flashlights and torches moving inside, an eyewitness reported, flitting to the upper stories. A big window opened and spat a great portrait of the Kaiser at the crowd below. When it reached the cobblestones, there was just about enough left to start a good bonfire. A rosewood grand piano followed, exploded like a bomb. The moan of the broken strings vibrated in the air. The bonfire was being fed by the furniture books, pictures, and papers, which came hurling through the window of the embassy. Gruesome atrocity stories began to appear in the newspapers. The German public read that the invading Russians were poisoning German lakes and cutting off the limbs of captured German soldiers, and that the French and Belgians were gouging out prisoners' eyes. The French were told that the Germans bayoneted babies, raped children, and cut off the heads of French boys so they could never become soldiers. None of the stories were true, but people believed and repeated them. However, the world pretends to divide itself, declared the English writer Rudyard Kipling. There are only 2 divisions in the world today: human beings and Germans. Anti-German feelings in Britain ran so high that families with German names felt compelled to rename themselves. The royal family, for 2 centuries known as the House of Hanover, a German city, became the House of Windsor, still its official name today. German Shepherd dogs in England were renamed Alsatians, and Dachshunds, German for badger dogs, were kept under wraps by their owners and rarely seen in public. Aww. Almost everyone expected a short war and a glorious victory. German soldiers marched off with flowers in the muzzles of their rifles. Our march to the train station was a gripping and uplifting experience, Walter Limmer told his parents. Such enthusiasm, the whole battalion with helmets and tunics decked with flowers, handkerchiefs waving untiringly, cheers on every side. This hour is one such as seldom strikes in the life of a nation. Here we have Austrian soldiers wave cheerfully as they depart for war. Let me see here if I showed you this picture here. Oh yeah, the plow ladies. At the same time, a similar scene was taking place at a train station in Paris. At 6 in the morning, a French officer reported without any signal the train slowly steamed out of the station. At that moment, quite spontaneously, like a smoldering fire suddenly erupting into roaring flames, an immense clamor arose at the Marseillaise, the French national anthem, burst from 1,000 throats. All the men were standing at the train's window, waving their caps. The crowds waved back. Crowds gathered at every station, behind every barrier, and at every window along the road. Cries of "Vive la France! Vive l'armée!" could be heard everywhere, while people waved handkerchiefs and hats. The women were throwing kisses and heaped flowers on our convoy. The young men were shouting, "Au revoir, à bientôt." I don't know French. My son, I heard him speak it. That was a little weird. That was weird. But my husband could. To a degree. I don't know. Who knows? I don't know. While soldiers on both sides went to war in a holiday-like atmosphere, their optimism wasn't universally shared. The British philosopher Bertrand Russell discovered to my horror that average men and women were delighted at the prospect of war. A week after the fighting began, Russell wrote, patriots in all countries acclaim this brutal orgy as a noble determination to vindicate the right. Reason and mercy are swept away in one great flood of hatred. Whatever the outcome, the war must cause untold hardship and the loss of many thousands of our bravest and noblest citizens. Russell greatly underestimated the carnage that the war was about to cause. In 1914, Europe's armies had only limited experience with the mass slaughter made possible by modern weapons. Yeah, we can keep going. Chapter 4, the most horrible August in the history of the world. Here, this picture. Belgian troops defend a hastily assembled roadblock in the town of Alost. At bottom left, a Belgian soldier lies either wounded or dead. The position was abandoned shortly after this photo was taken, August 1914. Those photographs are amazing. The most terrible August in the history of the world. Germany's war plan was to sweep across Belgium and invade France from the weakly defended north. German generals were convinced that the outnumbered Belgians would not put up a fight. Before advancing through Belgium, the Germans had to attack and destroy the powerful network of forts around the city of Liège, just inside the Belgian border. On the first day of the invasion, in the first major battle of the war, the Germans, to their astonishment, met determined Belgian resistance. As German troops tried to cross the Meuse River and storm the defensive forts, the Belgians opened fire and drove them back. Company after company of German soldiers assaulted the hilltop forts, only to be moved down by machine gun fire. At Fort Barschan, the attackers came online after The attackers came online after line. What? A Belgian officer reported, almost shoulder to shoulder until we shot them down. The fallen were heaped on top of each other in an awful barricade of dead and wounded. So high did the barricade become that we did not know whether to fire through it or to go out and clear openings with our hands. But would you believe it? This veritable wall of dead and dying enabled those wonderful Germans to creep closest and actually to charge up the hill. They got no farther than halfway because our machine guns and rifles swept them back. To demolish the forts, the Germans brought up giant howitzers, firing shells that smashed through the steel and concrete. One after another, the Belgian forts were blasted into submission. When the last fort surrendered on August 17th, that's only 3 days, the Germans began their march across Belgium, driving thousands of frightened refugees before them. Rumors spread that the Belgians were planning a guerrilla war of sabotage and assassination. Surprised by Belgian resistance and enraged by heavy German casualties, German soldiers imagined that snipers were shooting at them from every window and rooftop, even when there were no snipers in the area. In reprisal, German troops rounded up and shot hundreds of ordinary civilians, including women and children, and burned villages to the ground. At one place, a German officer reported the whole village was in flames. Cattle bellowed desperately in barns. Half-burned chickens rushed about. Demented, 2 men in peasant smocks lay dead against a wall. Our advance in Belgium is certainly brutal, German General Helmuth von Moltke admitted, but we are fighting for our lives, and all who get in the way must take the consequences. Yeah, but didn't you kind of start this? I heard you could have stopped it at any time. The domino effect. At the university town of Louvain, known as the Oxford of Belgium, nervous German soldiers misinterpreted a nighttime movement of their own troops. The Germans panicked, shouting, "Snipers, snipers!" They began to set fire to buildings where suspected guerrilla fighters might be hiding. During 3 days of chaos and looting, the university's priceless library of medieval books and manuscripts was burned. More than 1,000 buildings were destroyed. 209 civilians were killed, and the rest of the population of some 40,000 were forcibly evacuated. This picture, 2 women pick their way over rubble and debris outside the ruined town hall of Louvain, Belgium, September 1914. And the paranoia, the level of paranoia that you end up getting from soldiers that are constantly taught to be on the defense is just really frightening. It is frightening. Eyewitness reports shocked the British and French public. Newspapers in both Europe and the United States called the German invasion the Rape of Belgium. Wildly exaggerated accounts of German atrocities inflamed public opinion and bolstered support for a war that was increasingly seen as a crusade against barbaric German militarism. German newspapers, in turn, carried equally exaggerated accounts of German soldiers being savagely mutilated and killed by Belgian townsfolk. Germany's propaganda minister would claim that German actions were justified by military necessity and by self-defense, but he admitted that events in Belgium had aroused almost the entire world against Germany. German troops continued their advance across Belgium, overwhelming the small Belgian army and marching victoriously through Brussels, the capital, on August 20th, 1914. The Germans now were opposed by French forces that had moved northward to meet the German invasion and by a British expeditionary force that crossed the English Channel and taken up positions to the west of the French. But the advancing Germans, backed by heavy artillery, could not be stopped. Again and again, the Germans would dig in, wait to be attacked, and then mow down their attackers with rifle fire, machine guns, and artillery such as howitzers and cannon. As the attackers fell back, the Germans continued to pound them with their long-range field artillery. During one futile counterattack, the French infantry made a gallant show, advancing across the Belgian beet fields with colors unfurled and bugles sounding the shrill notes of the charge. As the ranks drew near to the German lines, rifles and machine guns pounded forth a rapid fire of death from behind walls and hummocks and the windows of houses before the attack wilted. Before it, the attack wilted. Running, stumbling, crawling, the French sought cover as best they could, and the attack ended, leaving the German guard the undisputed master of the field. It is clear that all the courage in the world cannot prevail against gunfire, said a young French captain named Charles de Gaulle, who later became president of France. In a single day, August 22nd, the French lost 27,000 men, most of them shot dead by machine guns and long-range rifles, or blown to bits by shrapnel and high explosives. Falling back all along the line, the French and British armies were forced into a retreat that would take them to the outskirts of Paris. And the United States was criticized for selling all of these weapons of war. This kind of destruction is unstoppable. And we were criticized. That was the crisis in El Salvador. So selling the guerrillas, who were dictators, artillery. This is our paramilitary guys, is what they're doing. Making a buck is what they're doing on war. Falling back all along the line, the French and British armies were forced into a retreat that would take them to the outskirts of Paris. During the month of August, more than 100,000 soldiers, French, British, Belgian, and German, were killed on the Western Front. Several 100,000 were wounded. British author Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, called it the most terrible August in the history of the world. The Great Retreat, as it came to be known, continued for 2 sweltering summer weeks at the end of August and beginning of September. Day after day, and under a scorching sun, hundreds of thousands of weary French and British soldiers trudged further and further south, covering some 20 miles a day, pausing again and again to fight off the enemy, snapping at their heels. Each infantryman lugged a 10-pound rifle and 60 or more pounds of ammunition, digging tools, and other equipment as he plodded along in stiff, mud-caked boots that inflamed heels, soles, and toes, and rubbed whole patches of skin to the raw flesh. Rubbed whole patches of skin to the raw flesh. The columns of retreating troops stretched out along the roads for miles. Scores of stragglers dropped behind the retreating columns, hobbling alone in 2s or 3s and struggling desperately to stay in touch with their units. So they're falling behind because they are so wounded. Cavalry troops dismounted and walked beside their horses, trying to conserve the weary animal's strength. Horses were important because they also pulled the big guns and ammunition wagons and the wheeled field kitchens that cooked on the march. They soon began to droop their heads and wouldn't shake themselves like they normally did. British trooper Ben Clouding remembered. They fell asleep standing up, their legs buckling as they stumbled forward. They lost their balance completely, falling forward and taking the skin off their knees. Behind the retreating armies, and sometimes beside them in the spreading confusion of the mass retreat, marched hundreds of thousands of German soldiers, as tired as their enemies. Our soldiers are worn out, a German officer reported. For days they have been marching 40 kilometers, 25 miles a day. The ground is difficult, the roads are torn up, trees felled, the fields pitted by shells like strainers. The soldiers stagger at every stop. Their faces are plastered with dust. Their uniforms are in rags. They march with closed eyes and sing in chorus to keep from falling asleep as they march. German troops crossed the Marne River and approached Paris early September. The French government fled the capital for the city of Bordeaux on the Atlantic coast. Oh, wine. Wine country. And the French army made plans to blow up the bridges across the Seine River in the center of Paris and to destroy the Eiffel Tower, which was being used as a transmitting station for French army radio communications. The Germans advanced to within 25 miles of Paris, but found themselves physically exhausted and far ahead of their supply lines. As they prepared to march on the capital, the German right flank separated from the rest of the invading force, opening a gap between the German First and Second Armies, a gap that Allied troops began to penetrate. Recognizing the enemy's vulnerability, the Allies seized the opportunity to make a stand along the Marne. Attack whatever happens, French General Ferdinand Foch commanded. The Germans are at the extreme limit of their efforts. Victory will come to the side that outlasts the other. More than 1 million men fought in what history calls the First Battle of the Marne, which raged for 8 blood-soaked days in September. The heat was suffocating. A French cavalryman remembered the exhausted troops covered with a layer of black dust sticking to their sweat looked like devils. The tired horses had large open sores on their backs. The heat was burning thirst intolerable. At one point during the fighting, French General Joseph Simon Gallieni commandeered 2,000 Paris taxicabs, which rushed thousands of French reinforcements to the front lines. Against all odds, it seemed the battle turned the tide against the Germans, stopped their advance, saved Paris, and came to be known as the Miracle of the Marne. The Germans were as astonished as everyone else by the battle's outcome, that men who have retreated for 10 days, sleeping on the ground and half dead with fatigue, should be able to take up their rifles and attack when the bugle sounds is the thing upon which we never counted, said German General Alexander von Kluck. It was a possibility not studied in our war academy. On September 14th, the Germans began an orderly retreat. Along a front of some 250 miles, German soldiers did an about-face and started to retreat their steps over ground won in bitter fighting during the previous 2 weeks. The entire German force fell back to defensive positions along the Aisne River north of the Marne, as the French and British followed cautiously. When the Germans reached high ground behind the Aisne, they began to dig furiously, preparing fortified trenches that they would defend against Allied attacks for the next 4 years. British troops marching along the French road lined with poplar trees during the blazing summer of 1914. And here is the war in the West. So now you can see there's Germany, Holland, Belgium, and that's what you've got here. England and then France. And here are the troops, is that what we said, marching along the poplar trees, which are just beautiful, right? And then here we've got 2 heavily laden French infantrymen and British troops cross a pontoon bridge over the Marne River during the First Battle of Marne, September 1914. So there's heavy laden French military men. And there are British troops who are crossing on the bridge. Amazing pictures of World War I. And we are on chapter 5, so we are moving, folks. Thank you so much. I am Dr. Annette Feravich. We are on day 176 of the Bookless Classroom, where we are reading about World War I, the war to end all wars. And it didn't, by God. Thanks so much for joining me. Come back here for the reading room, where we are reading the book by Kerry Kennedy, Being Catholic Now. Thanks so much. Right here. Right there. Thanks so much for joining me here in the classroom, where we are continuing to make your mind, your body, and your spirit nothing less than completely healthy.